Hey guys, Disclaimer Magic here, and continuing right from the 25th anniversary of the MTG Mistakes video, which obviously is a massively inaccurate way to phrase it, it's time for MTG Mistakes number 26. This one is like so insane, and I want to tell the entire planet about it, that I'm like mad that I didn't make this video earlier. I would say 99.9999999% of players I know screw this up. Like, you basically have to be a pro level deck builder or just like way the hell into deck building to not screw this up. You almost have to be into deck building and math. Everyone else, simply put, this is why your deck sucks. If your deck design isn't working, assuming you're shuffling correctly, because really that trumps everything, this is why your deck design doesn't work. Oh, and I suppose the right land ratio. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff that trumps it. If you have a great deck and like the best deck idea and everything's perfect and then you put 16 lands in it, yeah, it's not going to work. So the third most important thing, I'm going to get down to 10th. A most important thing in deck building is to realize that not all positive things and game swings are created equal. This sounds really obvious, but it's really complicated. When you are just conceiving of a deck idea, not like, okay, it's a heroic deck, I need boost spells, because I'm going to do boost heroic trample. You know, that's my deck idea. Before that, before you have the deck idea, while you're trying to come up with a deck idea, this is where this comes into play. Ha ha! Enter the battlefield related puns. Here's how to judge if your idea is good or not. What tier do some of the mechanics fall into as far as power level and advantageousness? Because like I said, they're not all equal. Now, I was going to make a map and just throw it up and show the different tiers, but I realized that would probably take me a week, and I think we all know by now I'm way too lazy to do that. Also, it would be set and mechanic specific, and it just wouldn't be durable. It's just a waste of time. But I will give some examples. Adding a creature to the battlefield, that is a positive. That is a game swing. That is an advantage. It's a good thing. We'll just call it a perk. So that's like a level 1 perk, because you now have one more creature than they do, and you can swing with it, you can block with it. So it's a pretty important perk. In some cases, and this varies with deck design, drawing a card would be considered below that because you may or may not draw a creature. Now, this is assuming you're playing super vanilla, generic, traditional Magic, like spells, creatures, swinging. Like if you're playing a mill deck, this totally doesn't apply at all. If you're playing a gimmicky glass cannon combo deck where you need to get the combo to win, drawing is probably more important than putting a creature out. But in general, with like, I'm swinging at you with creatures, I'm casting spells like regular Magic, this is true. Now, below drawing a card, scrying might be just a little bit below that. So if your whole deck is like, the whole deck's going to be scrying, that's like below drawing, and that's below bringing a creature out onto the battlefield. Because scrying is great, because like if you were to draw instead and it's a card you don't need, you just pulled a card you don't need, but scrying also doesn't actually put the card in your hand, you have to wait a turn. So I would put it a little bit below drawing, just a little bit. And they're kind of equal even, really. So that's why if your whole deck is like 21 lands, 39 creatures, and you're going to get out creatures of varying sizes that cost 1, 2, 3, or 4 mana and then swing with them, you know, it's a solid deck. It's not a good deck. It's not very competitive. It probably won't win. You need more synergy and more perks. You need better perks. Just putting creatures on the battlefield is not good enough. Are you going to ambush? Are you going to fight? Are you going to use removal? What are you going to do on top of that that's better? And that's why if you built an all creatures deck and are wondering why it's not working, well, that's why. You're only at like tier 3, we'll say, is summoning a creature, because I think I said it's draw and scryer below it. Are you starting to see why I didn't make the chart? Expect things to move around a little bit. Keep in mind, the absolute number doesn't mean anything. The relative power means everything. So if it's a higher, better perk, then who cares what the number is? So removing an opponent's creature. That is roughly equivalent, but slightly better than bringing out your own creature, because you get to choose. If you're just literally going to bring out a creature, like you have a card that says put a creature on the battlefield for free, which honestly, that's a terrible example. That would be awesome. But if what your action is putting a creature on the battlefield from your deck, removing their strongest, most detrimental creature is more important than you getting out a unspecified creature. Now, you going to get a super powerful creature from like your graveyard and then bringing that out onto the field, that would be way, way, way above bringing out a random creature from your deck just in general, and it would be roughly equivalent to killing one of their creatures. if it was like literally a 6/6 that did nothing, didn't have flying, didn't have trample. Because bringing out a creature that's so big that you could block their creature and so big that you could swing with it and their biggest creature couldn't block yours is roughly equivalent to removing their largest creature. In both cases, it gets rid of their most important, most powerful thing on the board at that time. Now, a symmetrical board wipe, I would put it roughly back down in tier 3 with summoning one creature. If you've got 4 and they've got 4 creatures on the field, they're about the same size, summoning one more creature means you have the edge and theoretically you could swing. I wouldn't because you lose a ton of creatures, but in theory you could swing and you would do damage, so you have a slight advantage. If you nuke the entire board, theoretically you would be able to bring out a creature after that, hopefully. Like, you wouldn't cast a creature then nuke the board, that would be stupid. Nuking the board helps you and hurts you just as much as it helps them and hurts them unless you planned for it. So assuming you planned for it, usually the plan is to bring out one more creature, so nuking the board is roughly equivalent to bringing out one additional creature because that's what will happen. Now, you can't just say, oh, their creatures will always be more important, more powerful than mine, unless that's the way you built your deck. So it might be a little bit above, which is why people play board wipes. They're not completely neutral. But it's really that low. Now, what would be the top perk, the highest thing you can do in Magic the Gathering? Pretty obvious, win the game. Literally an alternate win condition. Like, Felidar Sovereign would be the premier perk. If you get 240 life, you win the game. Or like that stupid artifact where you like pay like 10 mana or whatever and tap it and win the game. Or like get out 10 gates, win the game. So if your perk is win the game, yeah, that would be top level. What's the second tier though? This is going to be controversial, but an asymmetric board wipe. You blow up, well, we'll say in Garruk's Wake, you blow up all creatures and planeswalkers on just their side of the board, and that's it. Other than winning the game, I can't think of anything more powerful than that. And I know some smarty pants is going to say milling out their deck. Yeah, that would be called winning the game. And they would say, oh, traumatized though, milling half their deck. No, nowhere near an asymmetric board wipe. Not even close. You know, there's a reason that in Garruk's Wake costs 9. it's the best thing you can do in a game. Very, very, very close would be an ultra detrimental emblem. It cannot be removed. It is above summoning an enchantment. It's above summoning an artifact. It's above any kind of permanent you could put on the field. If you were to bring out a Platinum Angel that says that you can't lose the game, I would argue that most emblems from Planeswalker abilities are actually a little bit above even that. It really honestly depends on the emblem. Some of them completely suck, and some of them are like the end of the world. Like with the new Chandra, you just lost the game. Like the person that emblem is targeting, they are gone. They can't remove the emblem. They basically can't even win the game. Now, slightly below the emblem probably would be Platinum Angel, or something that, you know, Angel's Gift, whatever, or Angel's Grace, whatever the hell that card is, where you can't lose the game this turn. Or with Platinum Angel, you can't lose the game until it leaves the battlefield. That's like preventing you from losing the game. That's huge. That's like perk level 97 or whatever we're on. And you can, you know, follow it up and down because it's not absolute. It's not tiered. You shouldn't map this. It's relative. It's, can I make my deck better? Can I make the idea better? Is there a better idea out there? Like, should I build this deck or should I build that deck? Should I go all flyers or should I go all death touchers? Terrible example. Those are practically tied. So, you know, let's say tier 3 is bring out a creature. A 2/2 creature for 2, no abilities, whatever. Slightly better than that is Trample. Slightly better than that, arguably, is Death Touch. Slightly better than Death Touch, as far as I want to do damage and win the game, is Flying. Slightly better than Flying is Unblockable. Slightly better than Unblockable is Unblockable and when it hits, draw a card. Slightly better than Flying is Flying and Megamorph. You know, so it's just these little tiny additives that make them harder to stop. And Hexproof, oh my god, like anything with Hexproof pretty much beats anything else. Hexproof honestly even beats Unblockable. Hexproof plus Unblockable, or Hexproof plus Trample, that's insane. Or just outright indestructible. That's slightly below Hexproof, but it's context sensitive because both of them are ultra huge prevention from getting removed, and slightly above both of those is protection from colors. Now, it's like which colors and all this. This is like a lot of gray area stuff, but you get where I'm going with this. So if your deck idea is to just spam out 2/2 creatures, that's what you get. You get a token dump. You're going to bring out zombies, basically. And you have all these different ways. Like, you got a spell that brings out 7 zombies onto the field on average, typically. That's 7 tier 3 perks. So, not bad. I mean, 7 of them, that's pretty good. But what if you have a second deck idea where you're going to constantly grant green creatures trample? You're going to boost them to ambush, you're going to use a little bit of force fighting, and then you're also going to have trample. So either swing ambush trample on block or finisher trample boost, something like that. That is so much better than the plain vanilla 2/2s. Now let's say you're thinking, what else should I put in there? Maybe just boost spells. Well, what would be better than 16 boost spells or 20 boost spells? Let's drop 6 of them and put in 2 cards that grant hexproof so that also my creatures can stay on the field. That's a little bit, tiny bit better. If you can save a creature that's already out, considering throughout the whole game you're slowly running out of cards in your hand, so every permanent is important, then granting indestructible or hexproof would be super important because you can keep what you have on the field. It's even more important if they have a heroic ability, because then whenever they're targeted with a spell, they get bigger. So that's a slightly bigger perk. You've got your synergy building up. Now let's say you want to take out a boost spell and instead make them unblockable. That's not smart because it's a trample heavy deck. Trample already just negates the need for unblockable. Let's say you're thinking, maybe I should take out the trample granters, like an instant that grants trample, and put in a slightly more expensive creature that natively has trample, so it always has trample, then I can just boost it. Perfect. You probably opened up a gap in your cards where you can put in 4 cards that grant double strike. Now you're a tier higher. If they already have trample and you know that, giving them double the attack power, basically duplicating the creatures, how I usually think of it, that could be considered game winning if your creature's big enough. Like you could be like, this is the I win the game card, tier 100. And that's how I build my decks. Now I am going to make a video on specifically how I build my decks, like the actual process, how I use like the card search and all that. But as far as like logically, how I design my decks, how I decide, can I make this deck better? Or I have 3 deck ideas, which one is better? I just compare them. I think, how detrimental is this to my opponent and how beneficial is it to me? What tier is it in? And then you're totally comparing not apples to apples between 2 completely different decks, but if they're both like creature combat heavy, it's a lot easier. Counterspell control mill versus red creature aggro, that's a little harder to compare. In fact, mill is just an anomaly. You can't really compare it to anything. It just does what it does and you either win or you don't. If it's a higher tier, it's because it mills more cards. That is like the simplest deck ever. Like if you're trying to make your mill deck better, mill more cards faster. Wow, that was difficult. So next time you're thinking, I've got 3 spells that I can drop in. They're 3 different concepts. I can either go pro colors, double strike, or like ambush fight. Which one of those is the best? Based on the size of your creatures, so this is when you would want to start considering other factors. It's probably pro colors, although if you think they won't block because you've got death touchers and you have naturally high attack power by itself, it might be double strike. Remember, protection from colors always trumps hexproof and always trumps flying or unblockable because it's both. If you have like Center Soul, you grant the creature protection from the color of your choice, so it's always going to match the color of your opponent's deck unless they're playing multi. Oh my god, do I hate that. So you give it pro green, you can save it from a green kill spell. A whole lot of those floating around. If you give it pro black, you can save it from a black kill spell. You can also effectively make the creature unblockable by giving it pro black, and no black creature is allowed to block it. So it's a guaranteed way through. So pro colors is superior to trample, hexproof, and unblockable. So if you're caught between, slip through space or Center Soul, I mean, that's so obvious. Now, the number one problem that I see people making is that they underappreciate cards. They go for these big burst cards, like, I did this and it does a ton of damage. Like, Crater's Claws, it's X, and oh my gosh, and it burned from within, I can destroy an indestructible. Or I can hit the opponent. That's insane. It's like a single, like, yeah, it's a high tier card. You've got optionality. Like, what's better than a red spell that does 1 damage, a red spell that does 2 damage? What's better than one that does 2 damage? One that could do 2 damage to a creature or a player instead of just one or the other. Pretty easy to rank those. And so once you get way up in like Crater's Claws or something, you could say, hey, this is like tier 10. Especially it's an even higher tier since I've got ways to dump mana onto the field. Boom, it's going in my deck. Great. That card literally made its way into one of my last decks. But what you have to realize is you only get so many cards and you have to do something about that. So I'm not saying every single deck has to have card draw or else. Like, card draw is the cure for everything. It's the cure for top decking. Well, okay, that sounds really obvious, right? So if you literally put out an enchantment that costs like 4 and it says draw 1 card extra during your draw step or whatever, no downside, no negative, just you draw an extra card per turn. That is the end all anti-top decking, right? Wrong, and that is the #1 misconception that I see people making in deck design. What trumps getting extra cards, getting extra spells and lands that you could potentially play? What could possibly trump that? Building a deck that doesn't give a crap. It does not matter. It doesn't care if you're top decking. You don't even need the cards anymore. Why? Because the concept that you do is already on the field as a recurring automatic trigger that you don't have to pay for. Abilities that are automatically triggered every single turn are the most powerful thing you can do to prevent yourself from top decking, and it's probably, on this ridiculous scale I'm making, number 96. A ridiculous emblem makes it so that you don't need cards either, so maybe it's tied at 97. If you have an emblem out that makes them like take 3 damage every time they draw a card, the game's basically over, so you don't need any more cards, you already won. But if you've got 3 permanents on the field that all have an automatic trigger that goes off every single turn, yeah, you're good. You could stop drawing and still win the game, and that's why it trumps draw. Let's look at Thassa, God of the Sea. Indestructible 5/5 creature with devotion. Okay, that's pretty sick. And then the unblockable, are you kidding me? This is one of the best cards ever printed in all of blue. But ignore all that. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. How much better is that than a card that says pay 1 mana, scry 1? First you need the card, then you need the mana. Then you have 1 less card in your hand, and you drew that card in the place of a different card. There's a couple reasons it's worse than an automatic trigger, and people just don't think of that. It blows my mind. So cards where they do something and you don't have to pay for it, they're about as high tier as it gets. Cards with abilities you do have to pay for, like for example Thassa, she stays out there, she's indestructible, they're probably not removing her anytime soon. You pay 2, don't even have to tap her, and then target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. That is way above an ability, or well, it's not an ability, that's way above a spell that makes your creature unblockable, because it has to be a card, it has to make its way into your hand, you have to pay mana, and then you're down a card, and you pulled that card as opposed to another card like a creature. A lot of downsides pretty obvious, so anything out on the battlefield where you can pay for it, and then it automatically happens, that's like just secondary to an automatic one you don't have to pay for. Tertiary, 3rd place, that would be an ability where you have to pay for it and tap it so you can't do it again. And then below that would be an actual card spell that does the same thing, but it's a 1 and done. And slightly above that would be a card that's 1 and done, except not really because it has flashback. That would be like tier 95B. I lost track of the numbers. You guys know why I didn't make this a damn chart. So the cascading priority of tiers is automatic trigger, paid for trigger that you have to tap for, and then spell that has flashback, or rebound, we'll throw that in there too, and then regular spell that does that. And those are all just for like the same function, like if it was like draw 2 cards. Automatic draw trumps it, pay for draw is a little bit below that, and you guys get the idea. The same is true for granting trample, granting death touch, doing damage, removing a creature. You know the demon from Conspiracy, the mythic one, where you literally just tap it, don't even have to pay for it at all? Boy, that probably should have been the tiers somewhere. Yeah, you can do that once per turn without paying mana, without drawing a card. So it's so much more beneficial to put that in your deck than a kill spell like Murder. Like, words cannot even describe it. Obviously, the ridiculous mana cost of that card comes into play. You have to balance everything against mana cost and make sure it's realistic and it's doable. But with that down and that settled, that's the hierarchy of goodness when it comes to triggered abilities. Now, I know somebody's going to say it, Magic isn't this black and white. You're darn right. There's, I think it was Slip through Space. Make it unblockable and draw a card. Oh, now it does 2 things. How do I take like 2 tier 5 abilities and compare it to 1 tier 7? Because now it's 2 things. You just got to feel it out. That's when it just comes down to like, you know, what you feel is the best for the deck, what you think in general would help the deck work. And then when you start playtesting it, just think, oh man, I'm constantly running out of cards. What I really need, what becomes like tier 20, is drawing cards. I'm playing Control, I'm running out of cards, I'm top decking, and I'm losing because of it, so now the highest tier is drawing cards. So maybe you'll take out that double strike granter card that is just shredding everybody and put in some kind of card draw. because a card draw could pull another boost spell. Now, I probably wouldn't pull a double strike card. That's so high tier, it could win the game instantly. I wouldn't take card draw over it, but maybe like a +2/+2 in trample. Okay, I'd pull that and put in card draw. Especially if there are 16 other boost spells, because it stops being such an important tier if you've already got 20 instances of the same effect in your deck. So if you guys totally follow my logic on that one, I constantly get questions not even about how do you pick out cards once you've got a deck idea, but how do you even get a deck idea in the first place. So that's why I really wanted to make this video. Definitely hit that subscribe button, because one of my very soon upcoming videos is going to be how end to end I build a deck once I have an idea. So it's like literally the sequel to this video. And it involves so many tactics and techniques that I guarantee you probably haven't seen before. That's right, guarantee and probably in the same sentence. I guarantee you probably don't know everything that I'm going to say in the next video about deck building, and it is going to make you so good at deck building you'll almost be as good as me. That was a joke, people, but I will see you next video.